This webinar on affirmations will start with a prayer. Divine Mother, Heavenly Father, Friend Beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, and our beloved Guru, Paramahansa Yogananda, and saints of all religions, we humbly bow to you all. Great Masters, help us to feel your presence ever more deeply in our lives, that we may realize that your presence alone is our only true security. Oh. So, the topic for this evening is security, and I will read from the book Affirmations for Self-Healing by Swami Kriyananda. Security. Man struggles all his life to store up treasures for himself, to ensure his property against loss and his health against the devastations of disease. He rests his faith in outward measures and sees not that such faith is like asking a wave not to move. Security is his alone whose faith rests in the Lord. Most practical of men is he who offers his life to God, praying, "My safety is thy responsibility, Lord." This does not mean we should not be conscientious, but after doing our very best, we should leave the worrying to God. And now we'll say the affirmation together, and we'll start first by saying it out loud. I live in the fortress of God's inner presence. Nothing and no one can break through these walls and harm me.
Nothing and no one can break through these walls and harm me.
And now in a normal voice. I live in the fortress of God's inner presence.
I live in the fortress of God's inner presence.
Nothing and no one can break through these walls and harm me.
Nothing and no one can break through these walls and harm me.
And now in a whisper. I live in the fortress of God's inner presence. Nothing and no one can break through these walls and harm me.
Nothing and no one can break through these walls and harm me.
Now mentally offering it up to your subconscious. I live in the fortress of God's inner presence. Nothing and no one can break through these walls and harm me. And again mentally offering it up to the superconscious mind. I live in the fortress of God's inner presence. Nothing and no one can break through these walls and harm me. And now here's the prayer. I accept whatever comes, Lord, as coming from thy hands. I know that it comes in blessing, for I am thine, as thou art ever mine.
This is a very beautiful topic, and it's about much more than just security. The way that Swamiji puts this is so beautiful. He says, most practical of men is he who offers his life to God, praying, "My safety is thy responsibility, Lord." This does not mean we should not be conscientious, but after doing our very best, we should leave the worrying to God. That last sentence is in two parts. After doing our very best, we should leave the worrying to God. This is a really excellent life's philosophy. Do our best, be conscientious, but give the results to God, leave the worrying to God. How many of us, and I include myself, we have responsibilities, we have duties, we are trying our very best to achieve and be successful in whatever we are doing. We do that here in our monastery in Kandala. We have online classes, we have webinars, we're trying to do everything as efficiently and as effectively as possible. But then we should leave the worrying to God, and this is an attitude of trust. I heard somebody say one time that there are two types of devotees of Divine Mother. One is the devotee who trusts the mother and sits on her lap like a child, and whatever she does and says, The child just trusts and rests on the mother's lap. The other type is the one that holds on for dear life to the mother's skirt or sari and never lets go throughout their life. And really, we should be both. We should be hanging on for dear life to God, doing our best to hold on, but also trusting when we fail, when we fall short of our highest ideals, when things around us don't go well. So our part simply is to do our best and to leave the results, success or failure, the worrying, in God's hands. I have a friend at Ananda Village of many years. His name is Vidura. And at one time he was the general manager of Ananda Village at a very challenging time when we were going through the people trying to sue us adharmically. There was a lot of financial pressure. It was a very intense time, honestly. And the weight of the world was on his shoulders because he was the general manager. And he had a dream one night. And Swami Kriyananda later said that this dream, it was true with the concept that it portrayed. And in this dream, he was on a ship, and this ship was full of Ananda people, and he was in charge of the ship, steering the ship, keeping it safe, just as he was in charge of the ship of Ananda Village. And it was a beautiful sunny day, calm waters, people were relaxing and enjoying. Swami Kriyananda, he said in his dream, was lying down on a lounge chair, just sunbathing himself. And soon the ship hit some very rough waters and rough seas. And then it started getting close to some dangerous rocks where it was in true danger of running aground. And Vidura, as the captain of the ship and steering it, started, shouting out to everybody, "Come on, time to act, time to move, time to do these things to save our ship. We're in great danger." And Swami Kriyananda in this dream was still just sunbathing, lying there, enjoying himself. And Vidura started freaking out and telling Swamiji, we're in danger, you have to start to help. We need your help. And then at a certain point, Vidura, in this dream, he looked down through the waters, past the rocks that they were in danger of hitting, and he noticed under the water there was a track, like a railroad track. And the ship was attached to that track. And the ship was simply moving along on that track. And everything was relatively predetermined in that danger they were in. They were really not in any danger. And so he understood that he needed to trust in God. That said, he also needed to continue to put out his best energy, because you will find that the reason we are put into situations in life is not necessarily to succeed or fail, except to succeed spiritually by learning to put out the right kind of energy, to develop willpower and strength, to really trust in God, but at the same time to be conscientious and to do our absolute very best with intuition, with awareness, with kindness, all these spiritual qualities. And so really the test of life is not whether we pass the exam and succeed outwardly. It's whether we succeed inwardly. In fact, Swamiji one time said that for some people, their karma in life is to fail and to fail gloriously, to be just like one of the greatest failures, but not to fail because they're not putting out the energy. Perhaps they just have the karma to develop this kind of trust in God and security that this reading is talking about, putting out this great energy and giving the results in God and trusting that whatever God wants will happen. Our part is to do our best and to leave the worrying to God, as this reading says. So practice life in this way. Yoganandaji, Swami Kriyanandaji said that someday there would be terrible cataclysms and economic depressions and extremely difficult times, and extremely likely that there would be a World War III. They said these times would come. Yogananda said it emphatically and powerfully, and he left no room for, oh yeah, things are changing and this and that. He said, prepare yourself, these things are coming. And the way to prepare ourselves, because Swami Kriyanandaji was asked this, how do we prepare? Where do we go? What do we do? And he said, we can't plan every detail of this. Life is going to happen. World karma is going to happen. And if we really live in God, serve others, meditate, pray, do the best that we can in all that we do, he said, then God will take care of us. And he would often tell the story in this regard of a man just before the World War II. He was very bright and understanding, and he could see the world was headed towards a terrible war. And so he planned. He looked all over the world. He read atlases and encyclopedias, looked at the world map, and he decided he would find the safest, most remote place in the world so that he could sit out this war and be completely separated from all the warring parties. And so he found a tiny island, a very remote island, just in the middle of the ocean, of no importance whatsoever. And this was the island of Guam, which was the center of the greatest battles in World War II between Japan and the United States. And people were killed, thousands were killed on that little island that at the time that he was looking into it was the safest place in the world. So we can't just plan and scheme and intellectualize. Yeah, we do our best, but if we live in God and live in the trust of God and live with that faith, as we are doing our best, God will take care of us and will provide us with the protection from difficulties, the security, the problems. And so do our best. Yes, plan, prepare on every level. It doesn't mean we should be unreliable and unconscientious with even financial planning. We should plan prudently, but leave the worrying to God. And this is a very good attitude. You'll find that you sleep much better at night if you leave the worrying to God. And anxiety goes down, our health is better, we have more energy, we actually have more clarity of mind when we can leave the worrying to God. Because when stress goes down, our intuition awakens, our compassion and kindness, but also clarity of mind improves greatly. And of course, health of body, mind, and soul increases greatly. So this is a good practice and just a really basic way of life, which is to be conscientious, do the best that we can, and leave the results and leave the worrying to God.
Good evening. This is a fun topic on security. And it's fun because there's many layers and levels to it. I want to start by talking about the thing that many people think is going to bring them security in this world, which is money. And it has many layers, this topic of security, because of course no one wants to be poor. And of course a certain amount of wealth does make one's life more comfortable on certain levels. In fact, Swami Kriyananda would say that most young men who he saw who would come to enter an ashram as a Brahmachari, that they came from usually upper middle class homes, where they already could work out their karma and their desires to have a little bit of wealth and have the experiences that that brings. And so often, people take spirituality as either black or white, and say that in order to be a renunciate, that you have to absolutely just have zero money and nothing to do with money. And yet we don't live in a world where that's really practical. There's a saying that money is the root of all evil, but it's not. It's the desire for money that is the root of all evil. And those words right there are something interesting to think on, because it means that you could have a tremendous amount of wealth, and yet you could be a very spiritual person. Or you could have no wealth whatsoever and still be a very spiritually advanced person. So really, the outer wealth, we can't say that it has nothing to do with it, because human beings grow in stages. And in general, that human beings will have some amount of wealth before they realize even that that's not going to work. Usually, people don't have nothing and just not strive for anything and become spiritual. In that striving, even for material things, we learn how to build our willpower. We learn how to have more energy. And ultimately, usually, those who have lasting wealth are those people who are giving. And we learn through this medium of money how to be giving people. And that to me seems to be one of the most important lessons of all. That this is where true security comes, and this is where true happiness comes. That if we can constantly be giving, there's a secret principle in the universe, and that the universe seems to give back to us. An interesting thing to think about is that if you have health and wisdom, but no wealth, that you can make more wealth. But if you don't have health and you don't have wisdom, that it's very difficult to make more wealth. And we see that there's things even more important than wealth, was the point of that. And moving this topic right along, that much more important than outward physical security is having an inner haven of peace. But one more point that I wanted to make on wealth was that, and then I'll get into these more subtle realms of security, was that many people that I've met who have no money, they're always worrying and wondering, how can I get more money? And many people that I've met who have a tremendous amount of money, that they're worrying, I might lose it, and what if someone steals it from me? And it makes you think that, again, it's not the wealth, but it's this worrying principle. It's this inner state of contentment that is where really true security lies. And this is what we're trying to achieve on the spiritual path, is how to have a place on the inside where we always feel comfortable, where we always feel secure. Paramahansa Yogananda told one of his disciples, Dr. Lewis, that when you are in Om, nothing can touch you. And I've meditated on that over the years and wondered, what exactly does that mean? Does it mean that when you go deep enough in some inner spiritual life, that there's an outer force field that even if someone throws a rock at you, that it's going to just bounce off of it? And I don't think that it's like that. But I do think that as we have a realization on the inside that we are made of Om, that we are made of energy, that this physical body loses its importance as a realization that we have, as an understanding. Yes, conscientious, as the reading said, we still have to take care of our body and not do stupid things with it, that then we would get bad karma. We have to do our best with it, but we have to have realization that actually we're something more than this body, that we are the energy that animates that. And the more that we can commune with Om, the more we can realize that we are the energy that animates this body. And even beyond that, we can go into these higher levels of realizing that we're not even our astral body or our energy body, that we are our causal body. And up we can climb this ladder until ultimately we realize that we're absolutely none of this. And these are deep realizations that come, but the higher we go in these realizations, the more that we are going to understand that God is absolutely everything, and that there's absolutely nothing to worry about. And that realization, there's nothing that we really have to achieve except an understanding, and an understanding on the inside. But even if we start to begin this first understanding of realizing that we are simply energy, there's different kinds of energy. There's negative, downward pulling energy. There's upward, uplifting, joyful energy. There's peaceful energy. And we can start to understand that we can be peaceful at all times, and that decision is ours, whether we want to be peaceful or not. And we can begin to realize that no matter what's going on in this physical world, no matter what's going on with the physical body, even if the physical body is sick or whether it's healthy, that we can still be peaceful, that we can still be happy. And that understanding is where true security lies. And this is something that we have to practice. It's a state of mind. And we have to do all of the different meditation techniques and spiritual practices so that we can learn how to hold on to these inner states of consciousness, these inner states of feeling, these inner states of joy and of peace. And this takes time. It's not something that just happens right away. Another thing that will start to develop as we try to hold on to this peace is well, certainly something negative is going to come in the outer world. But we begin to realize that God is giving every single event, actually even every single thought, but we'll just keep it on the physical world for a moment. Every single event that happens, God is giving that to us, and it's happening for a reason. And we begin to understand that absolutely everything is happening for our own good, and that everything is orchestrated, if you will, by a higher power. And now, when you have a negative experience, something bad happens in the world, perhaps we were talking about money in the beginning, perhaps all your money goes away. Well, you might say, well, now how can this be for my own good? And how can God be orchestrating everything now that He's left me with absolutely nothing and I have to start all over again? But if you just keep going, perhaps you needed to learn a particular lesson that you can make all of your wealth again, and that you can make it in an even better manner. Or perhaps you need to learn to live more simply and still be happy. Some of the happiest times in my life have been when I've lived very simply. But do try to understand that the outer life, that it's always going to oscillate up and down, good and bad, but that our inner life, it doesn't have to go, even though outside, good and bad, inside does not have to be happy, sad. Inside can always be happy, can always be joyful. This is the path. And I wish you success as you walk it. I'll hand it back over to Devarshi ji, and he'll take us through the affirmations.
We will go through the reading and the affirmation again. Security. Man struggles all his life to store up treasures for himself, to ensure his property against loss and his health against the devastations of disease. He rests his faith in outward measures and sees not that such faith is like asking a wave not to move. Security is his alone whose faith rests in the Lord. Most practical of men is he who offers his life to God, praying, "My safety is thy responsibility, Lord." This does not mean we should not be conscientious, but after doing our very best, we should leave the worrying to God. And now we'll do this affirmation, and we'll repeat it a number of times, focusing on different aspects of consciousness and states of mind. First, we will repeat it loudly with the intention of commanding the full attention of our conscious mind. So repeat after me. I live in the fortress of God's inner presence.
I live in the fortress of God's inner presence.
Nothing and no one can break through these walls and harm me.
Nothing and no one can break through these walls and harm me.
I live in the fortress of God's inner presence. Nothing and no one can break through these walls and harm me.
Nothing and no one can break through these walls and harm me.
I live in the fortress of God's inner presence.
I live in the fortress of God's inner presence.
Nothing and no one can break through these walls and harm me.
Nothing and no one can break through these walls and harm me.
Now we'll repeat it 3 times more, quietly this time, to absorb the meaning of these words. I live in the fortress of God's inner presence. Nothing and no one can break through these walls and harm me.
Nothing and no one can break through these walls and harm me.
I live in the fortress of God's inner presence.
I live in the fortress of God's inner presence.
Nothing and no one can break through these walls and harm me.
Nothing and no one can break through these walls and harm me.
I live in the fortress of God's inner presence. Nothing and no one can break through these walls and harm me.
Nothing and no one can break through these walls and harm me.
Now 3 times we'll whisper it, carrying the meaning deep down into our subconscious. I live in the fortress of God's inner presence.
I live in the fortress of God's inner presence.
Nothing and no one can break through these walls and harm me.
Nothing and no one can break through these walls and harm me.
I live in the fortress of God's inner presence. Nothing and no one can break through these walls and harm me.
Nothing and no one can break through these walls and harm me.
I live in the fortress of God's inner presence.
I live in the
And now repeat it 3 more times, this time silently, mentally, to deepen our absorption of these words at the subconscious level. I live in the fortress of God's inner presence. Nothing and no one can break through these walls and harm me. Nothing and no one can break through these walls and harm me. I live in the fortress of God's inner presence. I live in the fortress of God's inner presence. Nothing and no one can break through these walls and harm me. Nothing and no one can break through these walls and harm me. I live in the fortress of God's inner presence. I live in the fortress of God's inner presence. Nothing and no one can break through these walls and harm me. Nothing and no one can break through these walls and harm me. And now, mentally only, with rising aspiration, repeat them at the Christ center here, offering it up to the superconscious. I live in the fortress of God's inner presence. Nothing and no one can break through these walls and harm me. Nothing and no one can break through these walls and harm me. I live in the fortress of God's inner presence. I live in the fortress of God's inner presence. Nothing and no one can break through these walls and harm me. Nothing and no one can break through these walls and harm me. I live in the fortress of God's inner presence. I live in the fortress of God's inner presence. Nothing and no one can break through these walls and harm me. Nothing and no one can break through these walls and harm me. And now mentally pray with me. I accept whatever comes, Lord, as coming from thy hands. I know that it comes in blessing, for I am thine, as thou art ever mine. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So please, I would encourage you this coming week to do as we do at our monastery here every morning. We take that week's reading, we read it, we do the affirmation over a number of times, we listen to the prayer, and you'll find that if you take this every day for 52 weeks of the year, you will really integrate these different attitudes and these different consciousnesses into your very inner being, and you'll find that it starts to find expression in your daily life. And the way to do it is, again, repetition over and over again, day after day, with these very powerful and sacred affirmations and words. So next week, the topic will be contentment, but this week, work on security and on repeating this affirmation. May the safety, the protection, the love of God be with us always, and may we always be aware of that presence, guiding, protecting our lives. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.